Hello and welcome to Founded, where we find the stories you missed in history class because the tea was hot before they dumped it into the harbor. I'm Tori Phantom, and joining me today is someone who is just trying her best, gosh darn it, Gwenna Lathland.
It's really all I've got.
I'm proud of you.
Is it working? I don't think so, but I am trying.
You're doing great.
You too, Tori.
Thanks. Are you ready for your pop quiz?
Yes.
It's time once again for your Founded Pop Quiz.
I need you to know I just had to adjust that volume to slow fade it myself because that goes on for a whole minute.
Oh my God. All right. What's even better is because I know these people in real life, I have a vivid image of what it looked like for Jimothy to record that in multiple pieces, by the way.
I need you to know, I didn't ask for that. I heard him making some weird mouth noises and giggling. And then I was airdropped a file.
All right.
It just ended.
The very tail of it.
All right, question number one.
I'm not going to get any of these right now. I'm still thinking of the pop quiz song.
When did Boston become an occupied city?
Right after Boston did not do any of the things that it was accused of doing to become an occupied city. 1769, I think.
And a 68.
And a 68. They were occupied for the year of 69.
Yes. And who was Colonel Dalrymple?
Was he the commander of the forces in Boston?
Yes, I wasn't expecting you to get that one. I only said his name once, I think. Good job.
Context clues. Don't think I didn't remember the dude's name. I just context clued that one in there.
You got to give yourself some more credit. You're trying your best, gosh darn it.
I try.
What happened on February 22nd, 1770 in Boston?
Absolutely no clue. Some stuff, I'm sure. You wouldn't have specifically referenced that date.
That was when the protest that ended with Christopher Seider dying happened.
Okay. Yeah, from here on out, you're not allowed to ask me specific date questions because that's triggering. That's just public school education. Don't. Bad.
That's valid. That's valid. And last question. Who was supposed to be in charge of Boston?
Acting governor Tommy Boy Hutchison.
Yeah, no one liked him.
No one liked him.
He did.
He really liked himself. I would say his sons were nice, liked him, but also they were meanie heads about some of the importation stuff and following the rules and making him look bad.
Yeah, he did get bamboozled into making it look like he supported the non-importation agreements. I don't know that was his sons, but it was because of his sons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we continue, we have a rule to follow. And that's where we tell you all that we have merch.
Merch.
We should get a merch button. You're right.
I'm terrified now.
You can get shirts like Samuel Adams would be mad about this, or a shirt in honor of Samuel Adams' dog that was trained to bite redcoats. It says, "I bite redcoats on command." We have several threatening huzzas. The tea was hot before they dumped it into the harbor. We got V-necks and hoodies and stickers. Very cool. There is a link in the description. Gwenna, what do you have going on?
So do you like my voice, Tori? Is my voice pleasant to listen to?
I listen to it several hours a week, so yes.
Good, because now you can listen to more of it. I have released adult bedtime stories called Dream Hollow. They're stories that go nowhere and don't really talk about much, but they're really good for falling asleep to. I may be the first author ever that hopes I have written a story so boring you pass out while listening to it. So that's called Dream Hollow. It's on YouTube. We'll leave the link in the show notes, and it's on my YouTube, Mama Cuss's Pleasant Peasant Media. And you can have my lovely soothing voice guide you through a journey through Dream Hollow, the place where dreams are made and sent to you.
That was such a great plug. Like, 10 out of 10.
Thanks. I do what I can. I'm doing my best.
Gosh darn it. Now on with the show. So we know that the incidents between the soldiers and the Bostonians had been on the rise and becoming more violent ever since the soldiers first appeared in Boston. And
last week we got all the way up to kid killing, which was a problem.
And the soldiers weren't even involved in that one. And we know that the Patriots claimed that the soldiers were the aggressors in nearly every case whatsoever.
Because what have we been discussing for multiple weeks now? At this point in the Revolution Rebellion, depending on what side you want to look at it from, both of them were making incredibly awful and anti-human choices. None of them were acting like the good guy through this part of our story.
I don't know that they ever start.
Neither of them were acting as the good guy. We know who won, but the victors are not always the good guys. I say as an American who enjoys the freedoms that were discussed ad nauseum through this period.
There are a lot of different actions happening. Yeah.
So we've got a dead kid. That doesn't have to do anything with soldiers. We've got soldiers being blamed for doing everything wrong. We have people blaming soldiers for doing nothing at all.
Yeah, that basically sums it up. What we also have is propaganda. So as we talked about before, the Journal of the Times kept all of the atrocities committed by the soldiers fresh in the minds of the people. Of course, that Journal of the Times was first published in New York, then sent to Philadelphia before making its way back to Boston. So it took long enough to make memories of the events fuzzy enough to manipulate. Yeah.
Huh.
But according to the soldiers, the townspeople were the problem. One officer wrote, quote, "The situation here is most disagreeable. Our soldiers are insulted and struck when on their post without the smallest provocation given."
It's almost like pumping the people full of propaganda propagates problems. That was off the
Right
cuff,
on the
Tori.
fly.
That was off the cuff, Tori.
You're really trying your best today. Wow. That is great. But the same officer, he went on to say that the same civil officers that they were sent there to protect had become their oppressors.
And now we swing right back to because there was nothing to protect. There was no reason for the soldiers to be in Boston. So while the soldiers were receiving wildly unfair treatment, their reputations constantly maligned, not to mention their actual persons. The dogs were trained to bite the redcoats.
Thanks, Francis Bernard.
Listen, the people did not want this either. They did not need this. And it is undue burden on Boston to have all of these soldiers
And their families.
wondering about. Yeah.
Yeah. But then the civil officers, like the members of the Massachusetts Assembly, they found the soldiers' presence to be oppressive, especially with their guards posted almost right by the door to the townhouse. Even just their drumming interrupted government function. But even more so, it felt like a threat to have soldiers right there. It's far more likely that there were aggressive townspeople and aggressive soldiers, and that neither group was a monolith that all behaved the same way.
That's inconceivable. That feels like making stuff up. You promise not to make stuff up on this podcast, Tori.
I know. I promise.
That no group is a monolith, and every group is going to have extreme behaviors that should not at all reflect the general ideology of the group they claim to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion into a group actually requires both parties to include you. So you can claim that you are of this idea, but if none of your behaviors support the idea, that doesn't mean that you're actually a member of that group.
And like a single person's actions don't define. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay.
Sorry, nuance, my bad. But either way, Hutchinson, as acting governor, asked if the barracks for the main guard could be moved away from the townhouse, but the commander said he couldn't do it. So Hutchinson moved the assembly to Cambridge, and the assembly didn't like it when Bernard did that, but Hutchinson wasn't worried about it, saying, quote, "I have met with but little trouble from the assembly compared with what I meet from the town of Boston."
These guys don't like me, but the people I'm supposed to be in charge of like me less. So lesser of two evils, I guess.
Right, because the assembly did have delegates from all over Massachusetts Bay, much like our House of Representatives has delegates from all over. So people weren't happy about moving it, but of course the Boston representatives liked it the least. Shocking.
And again, Cambridge is not that far from Boston. It's just not.
It's not.
We're not telling these people they have to, drive for days and days to get to their meeting. They have to drive another couple hours. Even at the rates that they were traveling at the time with the horses and the wagons and the phaetons.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't that long a trip.
It wasn't that long a trip. They're just big whiny babies. Well, and a little bit, there's political posturing going on over everything. At this time, people almost never said exactly what they meant. And they were considered revolutionary when they did say exactly what they meant. I mean, think about how many headlines we read where they're sort of waffling around and we have to translate what it is they were actually aiming for. They spoke an allegory a lot.
Yeah. And back then, they spoke in Roman Empire a lot.
Yeah, so when they're complaining, oh, well, this is an undue hardship, they're complaining about more than just the drive to Cambridge. They're complaining about the necessity of the drive to Cambridge.
And how they're still an occupied city.
Right. And even Tommy Boy Hutchison's move to Cambridge was a little bit thumbing the nose at the government he was in charge, or he was a fan of. Like it was a bit of a move to be like, listen, my assembly's so freaked out by the government protecting us. By the way, that's what this is supposed to feel like from Tommy Boy's perspective. The army is here to protect us from the citizenry that will not respect us as we deem appropriate. And he's still moving the assembly away from them. There's a little subtext there.
Protection.
From that protection. There's a little subtext there. And I don't, as much as I dislike having to say nice things about Thomas Hutchison, he was smart enough to know what he was doing.
Oh, he was a very smart man. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's easy to think that there was just constant tension between the soldiers and Bostonians. Like, that's the main focus in the papers they were printing and in the history books we've read, as if the way that everything turned out was inevitable. Because that tension was constant, right? But the simplest way to explain something isn't always the most accurate. Because the truth is, the soldiers and their families had lived among the townspeople for years at this point in early 1770. They formed relationships, they formed families, they worked alongside Bostonians. It couldn't have all been bad, right? Like, just 10 days before the Boston Massacre, a leading merchant and a patriot who, much like Joseph Warren, had a foot in both camps. He was able to move around both crowds and get along with them. He hosted a dance for his niece where there were at least 7 British officers invited, including the commander of forces in Boston, Colonel Dalrymple, and Captain Thomas Preston, who just so happened to be the officer in charge of the soldiers that would shoot into a crowd of Bostonians in less than 2 weeks. They were all there.
Yeah. All partying it up.
Mm-hmm. But, then again, at a dinner party just a few days after that, there were soldiers there. And it said that some of them went on rants about wanting to shoot up Boston and saying that it wouldn't be long before, quote, blood would soon run in the streets of Boston. Subtle foreshadowing. Just foreshadowing.
'Tis the American way.
But one of those soldiers had also said that women would have to be sent to the castle or something because they had no place in such violence. But one of the soldiers' wives disagreed and said that if fighting broke out in such a way that she would, quote, take a stone in her handkerchief and beat their brains out and plunder the rebels.
So no extremist language happening at all. No. Even the trad wives were getting in on the mix at that point.
Yeah, well, speaking of wives, on this separate occasion, because you remember they couldn't figure out how to quarter the soldiers in Boston. That was a whole controversy. So
Sheriff Greenlee got himself trapped in a warehouse.
He sure did. He sure did. So a lot of the soldiers would end up in rented houses. So that meant that they were neighbors with Bostonians. And there was this one soldier that they were the worst neighbors. They were always loud. They'd have late parties. And one night this dude is outside and he is like yelling obscenities about the town of Boston. And his neighbor, this woman, steps outside and says to that soldier's wife, I hope your husband will be killed.
All right. So yeah, things are going super great in Boston, and the massacre is a complete surprise that we can't see coming at all. It's everyone was shocked and shooketh when violence turned bloody.
You'd think, but at the same time, real friendships were being forged. And there were Bostonians marrying soldiers, which was like a whole other thing. Because like soldiers were supposed to get their officers' permission to marry. Like they often didn't, but they were supposed to. And at this time in history, that whole like arranged marriages or the parents' opinions of who their children would marry being the most important, that was actually on the decrease. Like that was on the decline at this point.
Yeah.
But
it still happened. It still happens today. In some cases. But yes, that particular period, especially the late 18th century, is universally, globally speaking, the point at which the arranged marriage tendency began to dwindle to the point where younger generations were looking at their older generations and going, well, screw your inheritance. I will marry the person I love. And if that costs me my titles or my lands or whatever it is you have guaranteed me by laws of primogeniture, well, blah, 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 bye. I love her. I don't know why I choose to be a dude in that scenario, but
I dig it. But beyond even the marriages, there were also growing families. And soldier families would have Bostonians as godparents, and Bostonians would sometimes ask soldiers and their wives to be godparents. And godparents of the 18th century with the Anglican Church didn't work the same way as modern godparents do.
You had jobs. You had work. You were expected to be involved in the life of the child, sometimes including monetarily, and not just like his gifts.
Yeah,
but like you had an obligation to help pay for the child's schooling or whatever was agreed upon.
Exactly. And it was common for parents during this time to ask 3 or 4 other adults to serve as their children's godparents. And as you were saying, that title held a lot of weight. And for the parents, not only did it grow their communities and their network, but that was a sign of commitment, honor, respect, and obligation. And parents would sometimes choose a godparent who they hoped to forge a relationship with.
In some cases with the godparents, if you agreed to be someone's godparent, you were accepting the chance of legally being saddled with raising this child should that child's parents die, which was way more common in the 18th century, that people would just keel over from infection, from disease, from injury, from unknown condition that we didn't have the science to diagnose yet. So you accepting, so you accepting like being someone's godparent is you legally saying, yes, if the worst happens to this child's family, I shall make it mine.
Mm-hmm. But not every developing family had reason to celebrate, because during this time of the occupation, there was also an uptick in unwed mothers, which is an absolute horror, I know.
The horror.
But that was significant, especially in the 18th century and for Boston, because if a woman became a mother and didn't become a wife, then the town would be responsible for supporting her if she couldn't support herself. And I don't know if you know this, but child support was established in the colonies based on the English tradition. And the women were punished if the father didn't contribute, because of course they were.
Yay, patriarchy.
Now, if the father was known, he was forced to pay a bond to support the child so that the child wouldn't become a burden to the town, which is why the uptick in unwed mothers during the occupation was such a big deal to Bostonians, because the father could just disappear. He's a soldier. He'd ship off or something. And so if he disappeared, an unwed mother, especially if that woman was poor, would likely end up in an almshouse being a poorhouse or kind of like a homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where it gets worse.
Great.
No, not great. Because oftentimes the child would be separated from the mother and bound out in indentured servitude until adulthood. Poor or abandoned or orphaned children would be legally assigned to a new household and indentured.
Yeah.
Oh, and even better, the woman could be prosecuted for fornication, facing fines and possible jail time.
We're going to glaze right over that a good number of these women may not have had the opportunity to decline.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these fornicators were fornicated upon. And that's an important difference that no one acknowledges, even today.
Reports of that were sometimes printed in the Journal of the Times. Yeah. Speaking of those papers, I bet you can't guess how the Patriots responded to the blossoming relationships between Redcoats and Bostonians.
I'm sure they were wholly tolerant and did not at all double down on misinformation and propaganda against what essentially amounts to human beings, because they were commanded to be ideologically opposite.
That's right. They printed propaganda in the papers saying that it was all bad all the time having soldiers in the town, and that Boston women would reject all of the British soldiers.
Listen, the number of stories across history of women being victimized for having done things with the enemy over and over and over again. This is an echo we could stop listening to. Dear everyone.
Please. But don't worry, there were loyalist papers, and the British were printing
the exact same rhetoric from the other side.
Well, they were printing about like their dances, which were called assemblies at the time. They were printing about their dances and their get-togethers and how huge the crowds were.
The wealth of the English language. And 9 things are called assemblies. I hate this language.
Yeah. They're just really focused on the crowd size.
Yeah. Lots and lots of people there. Dude, there's nothing better to do. Boston's an occupied city.
Yeah. But obviously, as a result, tensions only grew further. And Boston was a huge port town, obviously. And at the time, we've talked about this before, Boston is not what it is now. It was basically an island, at least during high tide. The only way into Boston by land was through the Boston Neck, which was a very narrow strip of land. And as a port town, their shipbuilding industry was significant. And in Boston, their ropewalks were often the center of controversy. People like Ebenezer McIntosh frequented the ropewalks.
What's a rope walk?
Well, ropewalks were sheds around a quarter mile in length, where spinners would walk the length of that shed, spinning the hemp strung around their waist into rope. That rope would then be dipped into hot pine tar to protect it from rotting from exposure to seawater. And that hot tar was also a fire hazard, which was a big bummer because fires were a big problem in Boston. And also, that tar was used for tarring and feathering.
Oh, okay. Well, convenient.
Yeah. And not just in Boston, but everywhere in the colonies, the Ropewalks and the people who worked in them had a reputation. One man said that the sheds were, quote, inhabited by the most lawless men. And on Sundays, it is not unusual for them to crawl into such places and spend the day away in concealment, which means they're skipping church. That's what that
means. Sinful rope walker guys.
Yeah.
Heathens. Yeah. Heathens with the tar.
Just what a reputation. But good news. We are now finally going to talk about the Boston Massacre that occurred on March 5th, 1770. But our story starts on March 2nd, 1770.
Okay.
This episode is like Boston Massacre, the prequel.
Okay.
Part 1 or whatever.
Part 0. This is the Boston Massacre Part 0. The pre-massacre.
Well, in the most simple terms, the Boston Massacre occurred because of a short series of events. Christopher Seider was killed, and then there was the Ropewalks incident, and it all came to a head with the massacre. Even people at the time considered this series of events to be the cause of the massacre, which is kind of a way of trying to make sense of something so senseless.
Yeah.
But as we said, the simplest terms are not always the most accurate, so we're going to talk about the Ropewalks, specifically John Gray's Ropewalks. John Gray, the owner of those Ropewalks, had a reputation for being anti-British, and he was rumored to be one of Samuel Adams' henchmen.
Okay.
Member of the mobs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
rouser of the rabble. Got it.
Mm-hmm. So just a few weeks after the Christopher Seider incident on March 2nd, things got heated by the harbor. There was this soldier named Patrick Walker that was taking a walk by the Ropewalks looking for work. I've mentioned that soldiers often took second jobs to supplement their wages from the army, which was about 8 shillings a day, around 12 to 14 pounds per year, which is around $2,600 in today's money. However, the cost of food, equipment repair, clothing, and more was deducted from their pay. Like, privates only received 1 uniform per year that they had to purchase out of their wages, which meant that they made about $0 per year.
Yeah. And also, they're stationed in the colonies, which still don't have things. Because everything has either been left there because of non-importation agreements or gathered there because of committees and assemblies, or just not made available because no one could afford anything because they're not allowed to have money.
Sounded like a great time.
No wonder the officers in Boston are mad. They don't have anything. But neither does Boston. No wonder Boston's mad.
And they didn't want to be taxed when they had nothing and no money. Shocking.
Here's what's even worse. It's not that they didn't want to be taxed. It's that they wanted representation to discuss what taxes were available and useful and would serve everyone without crippling the entire economy, because no one on that godforsaken island had ever visited the dang colonies.
We've talked about it before. There were people in England who thought Virginia was an island. So,
So, like,
they wanted things to go back to the way things were before George the Goose Grenville first took office.
Yeah, that's his fault. Okay. So anyway, we have all of the tensions simmering, all of the angers a brewing. John Gray has a rope walk.
Yeah. And Patrick Walker was walking by the Ropewalks and tells the rope walk worker that he's looking for work. And the worker says, yeah, I got a job for you. Quote, well, then go and clean my shit house.
Okay.
To which Walker replied, do it yourself. And it escalated quickly. Big surprise, I know.
Yeah.
Fists started flying, but Walker was outnumbered. He was beaten up, knocked down, disarmed, and sent running. But he swore he'd be back for revenge. And he was, with 8 or 9 soldier friends.
8 or 9 of his soldier friends. Okay.
Everyone had weapons. The redcoats had cutlasses and clubs. The rope makers had stout wouldering sticks, which was a tool they used to straighten their rope threads, but it was also commonly used as a weapon.
Okay.
Now, the soldiers lost that fight too. So they came back with even more friends, at which point the rope makers called out for help from their friends who came running over from nearby factories. It was an all-out brawl. One soldier even ended up with a fractured skull and arm.
Okay.
So
doing good. We're doing great.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. People aren't dying for mild misunderstandings. That's that we literally started this particular fight over a potty joke, but all right.
Yeah, when Walker eventually testified about this incident, he said that he was, quote, assaulted, knocked down, trod under feet, cut in several places, and very much bruised without any provocation given. But then a rope walk worker reported that Walker had said, quote, you damn dogs, don't you deserve to be killed? Are you fit to die?
Yeah, okay.
No provocation.
No provocation whatsoever. And I know that our modern sensibilities want to be like, but words. There is a reason we have had the idiom, a pen is mightier than the sword for the longest time. There's a reason to this day we have laws against incitement and instigation. You are a part of the problem if the words you said fired everyone up to doing dumb stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's like the reverend who had given a sermon that may or may not have caused the mob to tear down Hutchinson's house. He literally sent Hutchinson a letter apologizing.
Right. That wasn't his intent. We've got an intent versus a perception thing, and we can leave room for discussion. But when your intent is perceived differently, you are still culpable for doing that, even if you didn't mean to make them tear down the house or shoot into the rope walks or beat people with rope straightener sticks. That's not what you meant. The fact remains, that's what happened, and you are a part of the problem, even if you did no beating with the rope straightener sticks.
Yeah, the words we choose to use really do matter. But this brawl, it only ended because the Ropewalks owner and the commander, Colonel Dalrymple, they settled everyone down. They separated them. And then the owner fired the man who threw the first insult. And Colonel Dalrymple promised to keep his soldiers under closer watch. But nothing was settled.
No, because the underlying causes were all still there.
Mm-hmm.
The Bostonians erroneously hated the soldiers. The soldiers erroneously hated the Bostonians. And they still needed each other because they were forced to occupy the same space without enough stuff in it.
Mm-hmm. And the fighting continued throughout the weekend. And along with the fighting, the rumor mill started churning. Some townspeople were urged to stay home on Monday evening because something was going to happen. And I think those warnings go to show that there were real relationships. Because if everyone just hated each other, no one would have been warned.
Right.
And one grenadier's wife said that the soldier's sword would be wet with New England blood. Also, just real quick, a grenadier was a frontline soldier that would lead an attack. They were literally chosen for their size and strength. The position of grenadier was originally established in the 17th century and were the guys who threw hand grenades. I just figure as we get closer to the war actually breaking out, we ought to define some of these terms.
Yeah.
Just so it's not the first time you've heard it.
Grenadiers are scary guys to see because right behind them are all the rest of the scary guys. And these guys were big enough, strong enough, brave enough, arguably stupid enough to lead vanguards.
Mm-hmm.
These were scary, unstable mofos.
And at this
who
time,
achieved grenadier position.
Uh-huh. And that's important too. At this time, you got to think the muskets only had such far range. That's why they had to be so close together and shoot in lines, because there was not a big range and there was virtually no accuracy. And so that is a big part of the way that they would conduct war, was to get the big scary guys, because there was a huge psychological component of seeing the big scary guy running at you with a bayonet.
Right. Yeah. So these guys, they weren't special forces. They did have special forces in both the Continental Army and the British forces, and we'll talk about those later. But the Grenadiers were as close to the special forces without actually joining the special forces in the position of a squadron.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the arrangement of a squadron. Listen, I am really going to have to brush up on my military history terminology before we get to the actual fighting part.
Well, I plan to actually define all of this, because I feel like so many of us hear the word and it's like, what is I? Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah.
But anyway, basically everyone in Boston knew there was going to be a fight on the night of Monday, March 5th, 1770. Everyone knew something was coming. And the rumor was, if bells rang, which bells were the way that everyone heard that something was happening in the town. Bells were so important. But they were told, that was the rumor, that the bells wouldn't mean fire, but that the fight had broken out.
Okay.
But we do got to talk about the Thomas Hutchinson of the situation.
Where's Thomas? What has Tommy done? Or,
well,
more appropriately, what didn't Tommy do? Because I feel strongly like this is the thing Tommy didn't do.
I would argue that Thomas Hutchinson was always trying to do. It's just that no one cared. No one would listen to him. Consistently, Hutchinson is going to people like, can we do something? And everyone tells him no.
No, we discussed last week or week before how consistently impressed I am with Thomas's insistence that the system was not failing.
He was dedicated.
He was committed. This is going to work this time. It has not worked the 17 previous attempts, but dang it, this time it'll work. He's the one
loyal.
trying his best. You say I'm the one trying my best on this podcast. Thomas Hutchinson gave his all 110% of the dang time.
The most loyal of loyalists.
I mean, just naively committed.
Mm-hmm. So on March 2nd, the Ropewalks fight happens. And on March 3rd, Hutchinson received a letter from the commanding officer of the 29th Regiment. And in this letter, the commander complained about the abuse his soldiers were receiving from the townspeople and the constant onslaught of insults thrown at them. The commander wanted Hutchinson to do something about it. He detailed the fight at the Ropewalks and said that one of his soldiers was dangerously wounded, probably the guy with the fractured skull, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
So on Monday, March 5th, 1770, Hutchinson brought the letter to the council and asked for advice.
Yeah.
Which, as we know, always goes so
It
well.
always goes super good because the council's a huge fan of him and all that.
At least he doesn't get Greenleaf involved this time.
No, I was really looking forward to that bumbling Baloo re-entering our story again.
But many of Hutchinson's counselors said that, in their opinion, quote, the people would never be satisfied with anything short of the removal of the troops.
Yes, that is true. And then whatever the other guy says in opposition is also true.
And one counselor said that he heard that the townspeople were getting together, having meetings, probably a committee, honestly, but that they were trying to find a way to get the troops out of Boston once and for all.
He's saying this in front of half the guys running the meetings?
Probably, yeah.
I think some of these guys are having meetings to brainstorm ways to get these troops out of here. Meanwhile, Samuel Adams just be like, really? Is that a theory you've got? Okay.
Huh. Where did you hear that?
Wait, give me more details of what you think is happening. Let me just take some notes.
Hang on, I gotta publish this in the Gazette.
Hang on. Wait, no, that's actually a better idea than the one I had. I mean, what?
Yeah, so obviously, the counselors didn't really have any advice for Hutchinson. They really couldn't come to a consensus on what he should do. But they
Shocking.
did, I know, they did think that all of these small little fights were going to lead to something bigger.
Really?
Foreshadowing.
Violent foreshadowing at this point. It's not even subtle. It's just neon blinking lights. Hey, some stuff's going to happen because you're all being dumb.
I just like that every single person in this town knew that something was happening that day.
Every single person. And they keep having discussions about, oh, what if? No, when? When is the qualifier we are now using? When they lose their minds and begin murdering each other, we have problems. How do we prevent them from doing that? Make the troops leave. That's how we prevent them from doing that.
I swear, like, Hutchinson was the only one trying to stop the chaos.
Everyone else was like, no, this was an inevitability about 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That Liberty Pole stuff should never have been allowed to go on as long as it did. The moment the steel bands appeared around the large stick was the moment this was almost guaranteed, Pumpkin.
Yeah, but they thought, you know, like just keeping the occupied forces there, that would somehow intimidate the townspeople who were clearly never intimidated. But I mean, the other thing that could show you it was a bit of a inevitability at this point, besides all the rumors and all of the violence already happening and everyone threatening each
with
other.
the dead child and the traumatic brain injuries being given out like candy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing that was a certain inevitability was while Hutchinson was addressing his council, the Redcoats were passing out a handbill pamphlet that said, well, I'll tell you what it said on the next episode of Founded. But thank you for listening to this episode of Founded. I hope you found something interesting. Drop an email at foundedhistory@gmail.com and let me know what you want to find out next. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, click dots, ring bells, and do all the things that make it easier for more folks to find Founded. And remember, we don't see history repeat itself, but we continue to hear the echoes. We'll see you next time. Well, you'll see us.